Explosions have hit the bridge linking Russia to occupied Crimea, a major development in the ongoing war in Ukraine. The bridge, which opened in 2018 following Russia's annexation of Crimea, is a major supply route for Russian forces in the south of Ukraine and has now been closed after sustaining major damage. Let's get the latest on this. Now let's go to Kyiv live, where SABC News correspondent Trent Murray is. Trent, a very good morning to you. Thanks indeed for joining us. So this is, we understand, a major blow for Russia. It was a fuel tank explosion. It's Europe's longest bridge linking Russia to Crimea. Do we know any details about what happened there?
Yeah, good morning. I mean, it is just an extraordinary development, a major development, and I think it's fair to say probably a major escalation between Russia and Ukraine. And I say that because this bridge was one that was very much celebrated by President Putin when it opened in 2018, 17 kilometres long, a lot of money spent on it. It is the only bridge that connects mainland Russia to Crimea, and yet at 6 a.m. local time, it was rocked by those explosions. Of course, both sides very quickly confirming that the bridge sustained major damage. If you look at the bridge itself, it has got two major lanes of traffic going in each direction. One of those lanes has collapsed into the ocean, we can see from the video. The other one has sustained damage but has been able to manage to stay on the pylons. But then you've got the rail bridge next to it, which was carrying a train at the time of the explosion. It then caught on fire. We understand there was chemicals and fuel in that freight train. It burned for several hours. So once again, we understand major damage to the steel and concrete in the rail part of this bridge. I mean, all in all, this is a really significant blow for the Russians, both from the physical damage to this bridge, which, as you said, their military has been using to transport troops and equipment in and out. But also, it's a real psychological blow, I think it's fair to say, for the Kremlin. This was a symbol of Russia's annexation, if you will, a symbol of them taking Crimea in, building that road corridor. Yes. That road corridor now has been cut by those explosions, and we understand there is a lot of panicked Russians now in Crimea, given that route out back to the mainland has now been disconnected. Ferries trying to be put together to take them over by the ocean on boat.
Trent, do we know the source of the explosion and if anyone has been injured?
Well, we don't know yet about whether there has been injuries or any deaths from this. I mean, the Russians say that they don't believe there has been any injuries. Of course, there's a lot of eyes on Ukraine at the moment as well. I mean, you can understand why the speculation is that it was likely Ukraine possibly behind this. Now, we haven't had any sort of official confirmation from President Zelensky's office or the Ministry for Defence, but we've had tweets, believe it or not, which is, I think, how we seem to communicate now in this age of social media during war. One of President Zelensky's advisors tweeted a video of the bridge on fire next to Marilyn Monroe singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President." An odd video, but it's because it was President Putin's birthday yesterday, so a very personal message. We've also heard from the Ministry for Defence in a tweet. They said the guided missile cruiser Moscow and this bridge were both two notorious symbols of Russian power in Ukrainian Crimea. They have now gone down. What's next in line, Ruskies? I'm quoting there, but clearly they are trying to rub the salt in the wound of all of this. We are yet to see how Russia will respond, but we do know they will not be pleased with this development.
Yeah, US President Joe Biden says, there's a possibility of a nuclear war. What sense are we getting on the ground as, the reports of this escalation of the kind of violence that we've seen?
Look, that is a very fair question, and that concern, I think, is one both here in Ukraine, but also more widely across Europe. Because, of course, if a nuclear weapon was used on the battlefield, it likely could have a spillover effect and affect other European countries. It's worth remembering, of course, President Joe Biden was reported speaking about a day or two ago in the US, saying he believes that the world is as close to nuclear Armageddon as it was back in the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the temperature right now was already red hot when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. This has now occurred. So obviously there is concern that, you know, with President Putin suffering this quite major humiliation, it seems, with the Russians already majorly on the back foot because of those Ukrainian offensives around Kherson in the south, Kyiv in the north. It does, I suppose, almost back the Kremlin into a corner, if you will. And so, the worry is, do they use a nuclear weapon on the battlefield to try and halt Ukraine's momentum? Now, President Zelensky, for what it's worth, has said, you know, the West shouldn't be scared by that. This is just brinkmanship to try and stop the West from supporting Ukraine. But look, I think all sides would agree that right now tensions have ratcheted up to a whole new level. And I suppose from a diplomatic perspective, it would be hoped that there is some back-channel communications occurring between Washington and Moscow, maybe Kyiv as well, to make sure that this situation can be de-escalated, despite the fact that that war does continue to rage.
Trent, thanks for that update. SABC News correspondent Trent Murray, live to us in Kyiv in Ukraine on the latest on that explosion, of course, taking place at that bridge.